Hey everybody, it's Chad with Edina Realty and Team Dusick, and on today's episode of the Everything Twin Ports podcast, we are talking about lending. We're talking about the current real estate market that's out there, and we have a good friend of ours, Corey Verhel from Frandsen Bank and Trust here. We'll get to him in a second. It's been a while since we had an episode. It's been a really crazy spring so far with the real estate market, as many of you are probably knowing that you're out there looking and selling. It's insane right now, so I thought we just got to carve out some time. We got to make this happen. We got to shoot our next episode. So without any further ado, we're going to jump right into our topic today. So we have Corey on again from Frandsen Bank and Trust. He's a lender, does the whole shoot match, everything from single-family homes to multifamily and everything else in between that, refis as well. So I get a lot of questions over the course of the last couple months, people asking me, I'm sure Corey gets it, I'm sure you guys see it on TV, are we in a housing bubble? Is there a crash coming? I know a lot of first-time home buyers are just, licking their chops, waiting for a correction in the market, for prices to come down, more inventory to come on the market so that people can buy a house. And it's just very aggressive out there. And so I get a lot of those questions. And so today we wanted to not necessarily answer those questions, but I wanted to kind of do a background look at the lending process compared to the crash that we had leading up to 2008 and the current environment that we are in right now as far as the lenders, what were some requirements by the federal government back then to what they are now, and just the differences. And I think that'll really give a lot of us out there just more information to make a better decision about, are we in a bubble? Is it going to crash? Are prices coming down? Again, we don't know the future. We're not trying to predict the future. We're just trying to look at the facts, look at the information, and that's where we have Corey here. It's good to have somebody that's did some lending back in that period of time. I've only been a realtor for 6 years, so I was not selling houses during that time. I personally sold a house and had to write a check to get out of my first house at closing because I sold in 2012, bought in 2008, went to the top of the market, went over asking price, all that happy jazz. Then the market fell, the bottom fell out in 2012. It was tough, but we kept moving forward. So anyway, Corey, thank you for being here today. I appreciate it. So one of my first questions is just kind of from a lender standpoint, when you guys were doing mortgages back in, leading up to 2008, I guess, what were some of the requirements that were required for people to get a mortgage back then?
Yeah, so and to put it out there, I've been a mortgage lender for 18 years now, so I've lived through quite a few different stages of mortgage lending. So back then, in we'll say around, so I got started about 2002, through the thick years of mortgage lending, just about anybody was getting a mortgage. If you had a pulse, had a credit score that registered, and sometimes not even that, we could get you qualified. So very few people were getting turned down for loans.
Wow.
Which felt right at the time. It was great. The housing market is fantastic. Everybody can live the American dream and be a homeowner, and all was going well. So there was all types of different financing out there, from when we're talking first-time home buyers to all kinds of refinance loans to investment property buyers, to all over the map. Properties were moving. Some of the loans we were doing back then were very loose, very under-regulated. There weren't as many checks to balances as there were now, which we'll probably cover.
Yeah, definitely.
And so when we started talking about getting people qualified for purchases, there was very low down payment, very little skin in the game, and sometimes even on those secondary properties, they were all getting scooped up. So the purchase market was one thing. The refinance market was a whole lot different, and I think that's where things got really into trouble. Loans that people maybe shouldn't have been qualified for. And again, the lack of regulation and lack of oversight kind of led to the Wild West of lending.
Sure. So the refinance part of it, so for people who don't understand the refinances, that's when you already have a mortgage on the house and you go to the bank and say, hey, I'd like to either refinance it in the sense I'd like to get a better rate, or if I have equity in the house, say it's worth more than what I paid for it, or I've paid down a certain percentage on my mortgage, I like to take money out and, as a home equity line of credit to do some whatever I want with it, or just a cash out refinance. So that's what you're talking when you're talking refinance. And so it's cash essentially that people are either getting or just a better rate. So I guess like back then, like what were some people using that money for that you saw? I mean, were people like reinvesting in their house? Were they putting the kids through college? I mean, obviously each year people do different things with their money when they do that, but
yeah, and that really leads to the bigger discussion as far as what was spending like then and what is spending like now. Then everybody was spending. Credit card usage was high. People had boats and toys and new cars in the driveway, and they were spending on anything because they kind of had that bailout with their home, and homes were appreciating. They could always wrap it up into their house, cash out refinances. Debt consolidation was what I did for about 6 years consistently, because homes were appreciating, consistently year after year after year. And I think people, just assume that was always going to be there, and that's it's hard to predict down the line. But that's what was happening. Some of the crazy refi situations, we were doing second mortgages at 125% loan to value. So if you think about that, that's
like 25% above what the appraiser says it's worth. Okay.
Yep. And because they're just betting on that homes are going to continue to appreciate at a dramatic rate, and all these situations are just even out. They never really forecasted or looked that far into the future. Nobody, just kind of turned the blind eye a little bit on some of that. So some of those are some of the crazy things: interest only loans, stated income, all these different things. So again, the spending was a whole lot different back in 2002 or 2008 when we hit the recession there, versus what it is now. So when we talk about what's the differences, what are the differences, why is this potential, the bubble that people talk about or are afraid of or don't know, what are the differences? Well, spending in our country there's been a dramatic change for the better. People don't spend the way they used to. They're not taking out cash out for some of those debt consolidation purposes. Although it's not a bad thing. If we can eliminate debt to put people in a better budget situation, we're still going to do that and still going to advise to do that. But it's not as common, and people aren't spending the same way, so they don't need to do that. Other situations, it is still certainly advisable to put money back into your house, because right now you're definitely going to get it, and that's going to be your. Anytime you're investing back in your property, that's going to be a safeguard if and when values do come back down a little bit.
Sure. So like 2008, leading up to that point, it was pretty, people use their house as a piggy bank. Like, I don't care, I'll just go buy something, I'll refinance, run that debt right into the house payment. Not a big deal. Excuse me. So like now, 2021, like, obviously Dodd-Frank, we're not going to get into all the different federal guidelines that have like come down since the crash. But like, what is the lending environment now? Like, what does it take to get a mortgage if you're a first-time home buyer? Like, do you still need to verify income? Do you need to verify income? Do you have to have income? Do you have a pulse? Just pulse still?
Yeah, no, it is different from then, but it's still. I think there's misconceptions out there quite a bit. We're miles away from where it was in 2008 under the deregulation stages, and the Dodd-Frank Act made sure that lenders were verifying income. There's safeguards in there. We talk about getting tax transcripts to make sure tax returns weren't falsified, W-2s on every file, pay stubs. You have to verify the income. Some of the other things in there, there's just a lot more checks and balances.
Right.
We pull a soft credit report at the end to make sure no new debts are there. We have solid debt-to-income ratios. Underwriters have a few more steps in there. Appraisers are held a little more accountable. Lenders, there's a national mortgage licensing system, so now we're tied to each loan. There is definite accountability on everything that's done. With that said, there is still, the process isn't as difficult as some might think, being a first-time home buyer. Good lenders will make that process easy and explain it more up front and help educate more than we were doing, just kind of turning and burning before, because it was such a crazy industry back then. Now there's definitely and buyers and homeowners and everybody in the industry, from insurance agents to financial advisors to accountants, everybody's more educated on this, and that's really the silver lining as far as what happened in 2008 to now is it's just a lot more responsible. We're held more accountable. There's more regulation. It's a much safer environment. So we are set up a lot better with some of those things in place. If there is a little bit of a housing market recession, it won't be anything like it was in 2008.
No, I mean, just the buyers that I'm working with, I mean, it's incredible the process that they go through. It is a process. It's not just, okay, show up and get the money. But they are just so much more confident in what they're doing because they've been through a lender that's sat down with them, talked them through the process, and everybody, like you said, is involved in that. The accountants, everybody has understood this whole process better, and it's been more defined. I mean, the closing disclosure, 3 days before closing, there's a closing disclosure that goes out, so everybody, buyer and seller, know. The buyer for sure obviously knows how much money they have to bring to closing, what this mortgage is going to cost, what's their interest rate, is it a fixed rate, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely the buyers are just way more prepared and ready to go compared to what sounds like it used to be going through it. So
yeah. Well, the other thing I'll add in there too before we jump into another question is people have equity in their homes now, and they're using it, and they're taking care of their equity in their house. Right now we're if you own a house right now, it's appreciating without even having to do a whole lot,
right?
Which is just what's happening in the market. However, if we look back at 2000, the early 2000s up to 2008, people were maxing out their equity because, again, they were betting that homes were just going to continue to appreciate like that. Now we're in a situation where people are holding on to their equity, and they're not, and we can't even lend up to certain points on most cash out refinances or those different types of loans that we're doing, like I said, up to 125% before. Nowhere near. We can go up to 80 in most situations, and a lot of times it's cut down below that.
Wow.
A statistic I saw the other day was 28% of homeowners nationally here have 50% equity in their houses or more. So
wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, that's about 4 or 5 times as what it was back in the day, because people are now understanding how to protect themselves. We're not seeing as many people going out there buying second homes and all these investment properties or these cabins and everything else. Certainly people who are set up and have the assets and are financially solid to do it, absolutely. But it's a stark difference from where people were then with equity in their properties to where they are now. It's a lot more protected.
So like in a normal, whatever's normal anymore, right? Normal lending environment, like what percentage of origination mortgages are you doing compared to like refinances? And then contrast that with what's going on right now the last 2 years with low interest rates as far as like the percentages.
Yeah, so I think if you've been paying attention at all, and of course we have the supply and demand issue going on with housing, with houses being out there for sale, it's difficult, it's competitive, inventory is real low. So in a normal lending world, we're typically this time of year about 70% purchase. When I'm talking pipeline, the loans I'm working with, 70% purchase, 30% refi. 30% is about the average, consistently that we would work on. People are still going to pull a little equity out, still look to get better interest rates, into a better loan, cut term. Right now it's flipped. It's probably about 80-20 actually. 80% refis, 20% purchases, and that has a lot to do with the amount of people we're able to turn into homeowners or buying that second house if they own one now, and it's difficult, right? I think I don't know if you probably know what the inventory is at. Typically a good healthy market is about 6 months inventory.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
like 2 weeks if that.
Yeah, so
it's frustrating if you're a buyer out there. It really is. It's really incredible what's going on, and I attribute it to is just people are hunkering down. They're taking equity out of their house and they're going to put another bedroom on and make it bigger. Versus, all right, now I got to sell my house and overpay in a sense in their mind for that next house that's got that extra bedroom. But then we got lumber costs that come up. And so that's another factor that kind of puts a damper on new home starts. So that's actually kind of a great transition into inventory. Obviously, as an agent, we see this in the market. We're maybe about 2 weeks of inventory. That means if every single not a single another house came on the market in our area, based on the amount of buyers, it would take 2 weeks for all that inventory to get eaten up by buyers without any new infusion of inventory. So like Corey said, a healthy market, like perfectly in the middle of 6 months of inventory, and we're way below that. So it's the time to sell. If you're looking to sell, if it's time to buy, it's tough. It's really frustrating for a lot of people. A lot of offers on properties, 8-10 offers, very common to see on anything under $300,000 in our market. So talking about the bubble, is there a bubble? Is there going to be a crash once the end of June here? The mortgage moratorium is lifted, so people that aren't paying their mortgages, maybe because they lost a job or for whatever reason, there's a timeline that at the end of June that's going to be lifted. There's a mortgage or a tenant eviction ban right now, so you can't evict tenants right now due to lack of payment due to COVID hardships. So those are set to expire the end of June, and so a lot of people are like, wow, now's the time to sell. Get your house on the market before there's this influx of inventory from foreclosures potentially, and landlords that don't want tenants and they evict them out of the place and then they list the house. It's just kind of interesting to think, if there was this additional hit of inventory, what would that do for all these buyers out there, and how happy it would be. But going back to the whole question about equity. We've seen sales price increase by 22% in the last 2 years in the area. So 22% increase in sale price. So most people before the pandemic had, like you said, 50%, 40%, 30% equity in their house. Even if they didn't make their mortgage for a whole year because of COVID, they're still going to have quite a bit of equity in that house. So I think too is like, okay, let's just say they're behind their mortgage. They can't pay the mortgage. They decide to sell it after the eviction ban's lifted or the moratorium's lifted. They could still sell their house potentially, walk away with money to go rent, to go buy hopefully another house. But it's not necessarily those loans at 125% loan to value that were done back in the early 2000s. So then you have the price drops that happen because everybody was selling. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I don't know if you got any thoughts on that one, but it's interesting.
Yeah, exactly what you kind of said there. There's equity in people's houses, so when they are in a situation where they're struggling to make their mortgage payment, maybe they lost their job or through COVID, some financial things hit. It's not the same situation, right? We don't have. So when we talked about 6 months inventory is healthy. We're at 2 weeks.
Yeah,
definitely under a month.
Right.
It was up to 11 or 12 months inventory back then, which meant people. They maybe got into their house with a little skin into the game, and there was nobody to buy their house back then, or the buyers were different, and there were definitely people waiting out there to scoop up properties on the back end. It's a totally different situation now. If they get into that situation, you mentioned a short sale that you went through, those aren't going to be, we're not going to see many of those because homes are selling and selling at very good prices because market values are pushed up because of supply and demand. So that and interest rates being low and it's never in a mortgage lender's best interest to foreclose. And I think there's some misconception that they think banks can go out there and now make all this money on these potential foreclosures. That's not how it works. They don't really generally make anything on those properties. They will work with homeowners to make sure that they can pay the mortgage, or it gets into a situation where they can sell and then they can come out ahead even, right, and can reevaluate, restructure their financial position, and that can be healthy, right? That's kind of how the turnover in homes can go and still be in a good situation. So this is not going to be 2008. We're not going to see a lot of that even after the that gets lifted here in June. There may be some situations that in some inventory coming back on the market, but not in the waves that we saw 2008 to 2012 and slowly thereafter. So it, like I said, it's a totally different situation. I think there's been a lot of pieces put in place there to help control that a little bit and make sure that people are protected. Interest rates,
so you talk about that, how interest rates they really dictate prices. I mean, we saw interest rates drop last spring. As soon as COVID hit, the Fed dropped interest rates, we saw prices go up. Because now I can borrow more house. Well, now there's less houses to sell because of the inventory issue already. Now the sellers are able to accept offers that are higher because now that buyer can now afford more money, and so it just moves up up with it. If we did see an interest rate hike, even though the Federal Reserve has said, hey, we want to keep long-term rates, inflation, I should say, 2 to 3%. We want to keep long-term interest rates low. Obviously, they can change whatever they want, whenever they want, because of the Federal Reserve. But I would have to say that the current administration wants to have a nice, stable, walk us out of this current pandemic as we're opening up again. Vaccines are fully available to people. I think they just announced yesterday or today that masks are no longer needed in public spaces. So as things are opening up, maybe the economy is will be getting going quite a bit here again. But as far as the interest rate environment, I don't know. Maybe you have a pulse on that. Do you anticipate long-term rates staying relatively low? Have we seen an increase over the last couple of months? Is it fluctuating?
Yeah. So when we talk about interest rates, there's a couple different things to talk about there. And I'm not an economist. I'm not an expert in some of those things and be able to predict the future a little bit. But rates are going to be relatively stable from where they are right now. They've gone up just a little bit from record lows,
right?
But they're still in and around that 3% range. A little bit less, a little bit more. They'll fluctuate a little bit. What they're pretty much predicting, experts or others involved in predicting this a little bit, is that rates will maybe go up a little bit next year, a little bit the year after, but still be in the 3.5 to 3 3/4 range, which is still very, very healthy for people looking to buy houses, looking to refinance, pull equity out. It's still going to be a great rate environment, which is also going to help, because as we talked about before in other situations too,
right? As
rates go up, values come down and it compresses a little bit. And I think that's what the bubble that people are worried about a little bit. That happened in 2008. That kind of just crossed way too quickly back then, and it took 3, 4, 5, 6 years to recover. It's going to be a slower compression, we'll say, this time around, and
right. Slowly turn the faucet.
Yeah, artificially maybe holding interest rates where they're at is good. You've got inflation kind of kicking in there, and you got to the Fed has to manage that. So there's a lot of pieces, moving pieces there, but going to be much better shape interest rate wise for the foreseeable future.
One more question I have too is so based on the requirements to get a mortgage right now, do you foresee there being more buyers that are kind of sitting in the wings right now that maybe can't afford or don't have the credit scores, so that if rates did go up, potentially they sound like they can almost always only go up from here, right? I mean, it's been rock bottom for so long, and a healthy increase is fine, obviously, but prices will come down because of that. Will there be more? Is there more buyers that are waiting in the wings to get into the game to buy a house? That obviously the inventory level and high demand is showing that there is, but is there idea out there of any more buyers, 10% more, do you think, that are sitting out there that?
Yeah, actually they're talking about a 20 to 25% increase over the next 2 years in the buyers that were able to turn into homeowners, or whether it's renters into homeowners or wherever their situation is coming from. That's the exciting part about, I think, the correction that will happen for our industry here in the housing market and different pockets of where it's really competitive and it's hard to get into a house as a first-time homeowner. I've got plenty of borrowers that have pre-qualified to buy it. Certainly, if they can find a house, they will buy it.
Sure.
They just haven't been able to do it.
Yeah.
So there will be an increased inventory is supposed to open up. Whether, and again, there's all kinds of different levels of this. People building new houses to where they're leaving their current homes or moving up from that first-time homebuyer house that they had into the second, into the third. That's all going to start opening up a little bit. And again, that's
right.
Projection, but from some of the things that we're seeing, that is supposed to open up, and they're expecting pretty good increases in turning new buyers into homeowners here. So
hypothetical. It sounds like there's not going to be, doesn't look like there's going to be this big crash like there was in 2008. If anything, rates would go up. That would potentially bring prices down a bit. And then in contrast, it would bring more buyers into the market that are currently in the market right now is probably what we're going to see more likely, potentially, to soak up some of that price reduction potentially in the next couple of years. I know the President Biden has put out first-time home buyer credit. I've heard of like $15,000. Obviously, he's got to get that passed, but there's a lot of different things floating out there. It's just interesting when you talk housing, because housing is such a lifeblood of the economy, and everything kind of rolls off of that. But again, we're not trying to predict anything. We're just trying to talk through some of the details of kind of what has happened, where we're at now. So if someone's looking to buy a house right now in this crazy market, and they're like, let's get rolling with the process, I guess what's like the biggest thing that you would say for them to kind of start doing or to focus on to get ready to buy that house?
Yeah, the biggest things, take care of your credit. And I think people have more tools to do that. They have different, everybody is managing credit these days, whether it's your bank app, whether it's Credit Karma and things like that. Those are okay tools. They're not always 100% accurate, obviously, but take care of your credit. If there's things, and that's why sitting down with a mortgage lender is beneficial, just to find out exactly where you're at. Maybe there's some things on your credit you're not even aware of, things like that, and we can give you advice on how to take care of some of that stuff and be ready to buy, whether you're ready to buy right there or to put yourself in better position since it's so competitive. So along with that is saving, the bigger down payment you can have saved up, be ready to go to also cover down payment closing costs now because sellers aren't necessarily accepting or covering as many buyer closing costs. There's not as many of those situations in a competitive market, so you got to have some cash in there. It's just putting yourselves in better position. We still have loans that can get first-time home buyers into homes with low down payments. Problem is getting those offers, competitive offers accepted. You want to put yourself in the best position possible. So those are just a couple basic things to do at one. Take care of credit, save up money. Doesn't mean you have to save up 20% down payment. Another misconception, but have some money to have. To put in there and meet with the mortgage lender because again, we'll help make it all make sense. Get you in a position that you can make a solid offer on or advise you in those little things there. So that whether you're ready to buy this minute, 6 months from now, or a year from now, can help you at least figure out exactly where you sit. So.
Great. Thanks. Great information. Again, guys, we're going to link all that information to get in contact with Corey in the show here. He's been here doing this for 18 years. He's seen it. He's seen the highs and the lows, and he's a great asset to work with and a great guy to walk you through the process. So thanks again for being here today, and thank you for the questions, everybody out there. This was all brought on by questions from buyers and sellers that I've been working with over the last couple months here. So keep your questions coming. Thanks for tuning in today, and you guys take care, and we'll see you next time on the Everything Twin Ports podcast. Have a great one.